Welcome back to another week of Wrestling Roundtable here on YouTube. I am your host, Eric Santamaria. Sitting to my left, which is your right, is Brett Simonello. And to my right, which is your left, is Rodney LeConte and Lawrence Haber. And thank God Brock Lesnar got into UFC, because now we have an excuse to talk about MMA, which we would certainly like to be doing a lot more than pro wrestling sometimes.
Thank you very much, MMA.
But Brock Lesnar's last fight at UFC 87 wasn't scheduled to be Heath Herring. It was going to be Mark Coleman. And of course, Coleman got injured, and he was just inducted in the UFC Hall of Fame, so it would have been a big, irresistible force meets the immovable object, the innovator of ground and pound against the new
up-and-comer,
the supposed prodigy of what is going to be the standard for the heavyweight division for the foreseeable future. Everyone sees the potential in Brock Lesnar, but we weren't sure if he was going to get past Heath Herring or not, because Heath Herring, of course, had a great record in Pride, and he was also a hell of a lot more experienced than Mr. Only had 2 fights before this, which went 50-50. So, what were your thoughts on the Heath Herring fight with Brock Lesnar?
Me, personally, I was very nervous of Brock's chin.
We all were.
We all were, because Heath Herring, I've seen him, and he didn't make a great UFC debut. He lost to a guy, Jacob Bryan, who was kind of unknown, 9-0, smaller territories, I should say. And he lost because Jacob Bryan had a wrestling match. So I thought maybe Brock would do the same.
Mm-hmm.
But, again, Brock lost his last fight, and I just wasn't sure. But the first minute, I knew Brock had it.
Well, do you think it was smart to start off the fight with a flying knee? Because, okay, here's the thing. You can tell watching the fight, especially if you saw the first fight with Frank Mir in February, that Brock was being a lot more cautious in this fight.
He didn't want to get caught.
He didn't want to get caught, but Heath Herring does not have the jiu-jitsu that Frank Mir has. Heath Herring is more of a stand-up kind of guy. Even with Chet Congo, he had some trouble on the ground. Chet Congo has horrible, horrible ground game, and Heath Herring managed to squeak out a win from him. Now with Brock, Brock is probably the most massive, athletic heavyweight, maybe one of the most athletic heavyweights to have in the world in MMA. Yeah, he had very great wrestling, so I think he had a great game plan against Heath Herring. He used his strengths.
Okay, well, speaking of his strengths, and you mentioned how fast he was, I believe someone made this observation, and I'm pretty sure it's true, and if it's not, it's close to it, that in the 3 fights that Brock Lesnar's had so far as an MMA fighter, every punch he's thrown has knocked someone down. And when he did, he was on Herring like a rhino.
He ran at him like a bull.
That's when he stopped, though. It was almost like a deer in headlights. Like, all right, I got him down. Now what the fuck do I do with him?
Well, I don't think it was he didn't know
Take
what
that
maybe,
big fucking hammer and smash his brains in. I'm sorry.
It's true. When we were watching it, I can't sit down during a Brock Lesnar fight. I love Brock Lesnar, and I want him to succeed, because I think that'd be the coolest thing in the world to go from NCAA, WWF champion, and then UFC champion. That'd be like the coolest real thing that a guy could do out since Kurt Angle won the Olympics and went to WWF. But he didn't really go for the kill. He didn't really go for a submission. He didn't go to hammer fist him like he was doing to Frank Mir before.
So you're faulting him for not putting him away. Now, do you think that's a function of him not knowing how to put him away? This is for round 2. Or is it because he felt that if he did go for the kill, he'd leave himself open again and lose the fight somehow?
He was very overzealous with Frank Mir. You saw he was constantly throwing punches, which did some damage. And this fight, he knew he had him. He wanted to control him. He wanted to test his pacing. He breathed right. He was a lot smarter. You can tell he grew a lot more in those 6 months.
He found out one mistake and your match is over.
Absolutely.
He was cautious.
You take one little step and you're done.
And especially the last fight at 88 with Liddell and Rashad Evans, that more than anything showed, like I was saying to you the whole night, everyone's voting for Chuck Liddell. He's easily going to win. Everyone expected it, but anyone can win at any time.
Right.
Exactly.
And I don't know if it's being overzealous. It was at the end when he got careless, but 90% of that fight he was dominating. And he got out of some really good armbar attempts, just swept out of them, and it was really impressive. But, like Lawrence was saying, he knew how important this fight was. To come in and have 2 out of your 3 contractual fights lose when you've got so much money invested in you, and they do have a lot.
In his hometown.
Yes, he knew he had to win this match. So is it because he was too cautious, too nervous, didn't know? What do you think it was?
More cautious of anything else. But I still think he mounted him a bunch of times. He had his back a bunch of times.
Sounds like my weekend.
And the mount, you know, he could have at least thrown some punches. He was just in positions where experienced fighters would have finished him, but I think he knows where Heath Herring has been, he's fought, and he didn't want to, you know, get himself caught like he did in the Mir fight.
I don't think he was nervous at all. I think my favorite part of the fight was he brought some of that WWE style into it. He was talking shit to him when he pushed him off. At the end of,
I don't think that was appropriate.
You know what? I like it. I enjoyed it.
I like it, but
at the end of all the other guys' fights, you know, he was a really good fighter. I respect the hell out of him. He's going to be great one day. Lesnar goes, I whooped you there. Woo!
Well,
that was great.
But when he was doing the lasso thing,
that's
the lasso thing. Yeah, but
it's offensive, but it's cool.
Hold on.
No, it's hilarious.
Let's put it this way. All that stuff after the fight, it's really for show.
There was time left in the fight, and he was up and he was lassoing.
And he learned to throw a punch after that. What if that punch knocked him out?
I said after the fight.
Yes.
I don't know if it's, I'm sure it's part of his personality, but we all know that this sort of conflict and trash talking, especially with the king of talking shit, Dana White at the helm, is part of the show, and it is part of the angles.
It's a show, it's entertainment.
But to be doing that during the fight, especially against someone infinitely more experienced than him, I thought was way too much.
He was doing it in the first
round.
But
to play devil's advocate, at the same time, some of the UFC fans should get off their high horse. Maybe Brock's special and different, and maybe the elitist UFC crowd with everybody's trained and it's macho BS. If he's just going to be this campy guy who also happens to be a badass that could kick your ass in UFC, just as good as any of these straight edge, smart, you know, trained guys, and be able to lasso people around and still kick the crap out of them and win, so be it.
There's a difference between gloating during the fight
not the military,
and after the fight.
You know?
There's a whole big difference between
Why?
Because he took his eye off the ball.
But if he
still wins the fight, but if he wins the fight, does it matter?
Him doing that, like Roy Jones winding up and throwing, you know.
Ali, Muhammad Ali did it all the time.
Because the fact that when he did that, Heath Herring quickly, with the snap of a finger, got Brock off,
almost knocked him out,
almost
threw a punch.
Almost, but didn't. But isn't a risk to take in a fight.
In MMA, like you said, anything can happen.
It's not a team sport. It's him. If he wants to do it,
I'm happy he did it. He can last him. He can say anything all he wants. Because to me, Brock is the new Tito Ortiz of the UFC.
Definitely, that's for sure.
You never saw Tito doing that during fights.
Well, Tito's not going to make the money Brock's going to make.
Maybe it's part of Brock's personality. Maybe he can't win unless he acts like that.
Tito Jesus making a lot more money than Brock is right now.
Because he's doing fucking...
But what Lawrence said about the smart Mark MMA fans, I think he did win over a lot of them, maybe
he won.
At the last fight with Mir. I mean, his first fight. Because he was impressive enough that I think they accepted him into the fold and they liked the guy. But the thing is, do you think that he's going to be fighting Randy Couture next, and it is a title fight? This is 5 rounds as opposed to 3. And it looked maybe towards the end of the second round and into the third that Brock's arms were starting to dangle a little. Do you think that he's going to gas in a title fight?
No.
Yeah.
No, I don't think so. But at the same time, you have some. He's in that title fight. He's going to be fighting at around 275, 280. That's a lot to carry from one guy for 25 minutes. I know he's come from an amateur background, and 6 minutes could seem like an hour. But this is 25 minutes.
Yeah, I don't think you can compare it to wrestling in this sense where, well, he did an Ironman match. Well, yeah, with lots of resting and cooperating with an opponent. It's a little different.
Well, I'll talk about amateur wrestling.
Well, I'm saying some people will say that about Brock.
Yeah. The man does run up hills with logs on his shoulders.
With Brock catches him in the first 2 seconds, knocks him out.
Well, that would be pretty amazing. But we're going to be talking about what may happen and what may not happen during the Randy Couture Lesnar fight, because we're going to be talking about that next. Stay tuned. More Wrestling Roundtable when we come back.
Go Brock.
When he laughed at him?
What the fuck
that was low class.
What the fuck was that?
That was low class. When
that was
awesome. And he hugs him and then he does the lasso.
That was wrong. The lasso I could live with, but laughing at the and pointing. Like your mama says, don't do that.
Do you hear me now? I want Goldberg.
Well, here comes the pain.
Forget pro wrestling altogether. If you just go mainstream, how can you explain to someone on SportsCenter why a guy who's going 1-1 is getting a title shot?
Same reason Muhammad Ali gets out of jail and gets a title shot.
He was a champion before.
Yeah, but you have to interpret the WWF. That's the reason why. Who gets signed in UFC after one fight?